Maxey. Wow, what a play. He's got Bogdanovich thinking about a three. There it is. Yes! From beyond. Oh, and there's five. Coming up with a steal. Good. Curry open. It's for three. Yes!
And now, Morning Cup of Joe. Yo, what is going on, guys? What is happening? Welcome to Morning Cup of Joe, Sixers Morning After, where we're talking about the top takeaways, reacting to the Nets game. We're going to break down, can the Sixers slow down Kevin Durant in a playoff series? I've got an interview with Mark Henry Jr. where we talk about point guard Furkan Korkmaz and Doc Rivers' late game struggles here. And man, did they show up in game number 2. Anyway, then we're going to wrap it up with my top 5 plays of the Nets game, and I'm going to have my man Tiago react to it. Tiago, good morning, man. How you doing, dude?
Good morning, Chris. Did not think we'll be talking about a Sixers loss today, especially after watching most of that game last night, up 10 with about 5 minutes left in the game, and everything else went downhill after that, and it seems to be a common pattern with this team, especially recently. So this time we can talk about it in more detail.
We already have some comments. Guys, if you're watching us live, please feel free to make comments, ask questions, and always share the love. Hit this like button, and please be sure to subscribe. Ben Butler says point center Joel Embiid and PG by committee is asking too much. Ben says lots of positives, lots of late game issues. We're going to be talking about that. Let's dive right in. The Sixers really, truly came out firing on all cylinders last night. They hit 6 3-pointers in the first quarter. Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Seth Curry, I believe, were 6 of 6 within the first 12 minutes of this game. Unfortunately, you look at this game and you had flashbacks, you had nightmares of everything you have seen in the past when it comes to Doc Rivers and the Sixers in the playoffs. The Sixers didn't have a bucket the last, 5:32 remaining in the fourth quarter. The Nets got their first lead on LaMarcus Aldridge's and won with 48 seconds left, giving the Nets a 1-point lead. You had Doc Rivers not electing to call a challenge on a Danny Green potential charge. And then it just it all fell apart from there. It was like literally watching the Sixers in the playoffs in previous years. I'm going to show a play that I think was massive. This was before the Danny Green foul. And here we go.
Durant to Aldridge, 5 on the shot clock. Aldridge against Embiid. Head fake. Shot clock at 2. And a 24-second violation.
So the Sixers have no momentum on their side. They force a 24-second violation on the Nets. Sure enough, let's watch what happens on the following offensive possession.
Sixers defended that beautifully. It's up to the coaches to use their challenge. Embiid against Aldridge. Drives baseline, gets inside, missed it. Rebound Harden.
So what do we see there, Tiago? You talk about Doc Rivers' offense, lack of offense, no ball movement, and the ball stopped in the second half. No one can deny that. What about you, Tiago? While you talk, I'm going to slow down this play.
Yeah, big picture, what you see there is a center who has been asked to do way too much within the offense, and he's running out of gas. And it's a common theme with Joel Embiid late in games. But if we go into more detail about in general, and the overarching theme is how the Sixers deploy their offense late in games. And if you're looking at very specific the position the players on this particular play, your true point guard Tyrese Maxey is sitting in dunker position, kind of like how the Sixers used to play Ben Simmons late in games. So all the talk about how Ben Simmons could not be used in a late game offense because you have to hide him in a dunker position. I mean, Chris, you're showing it right there. Tyrese Maxey, 6'3", Tyrese Maxey, not 6'10", Tyrese Maxey, sitting in the dunker spot. So that's first and foremost. If I'm thinking about how I'm going to deploy late game offense, obviously I wanted to go through my best player being Joel Embiid. But as we've seen through the course of Joe's career, is that, as the game progresses, it becomes harder and harder for him to score the basketball because it's so taxing to do so in the low block. So what I go back to with the Sixers, and we talked about this in the post-game show, is that you have to have alternatives to a Joel Embiid isolation. So if it's not there, like it wasn't there on the look, I mean, Joel got the ball. I don't know if you can go back to the play or not, Chris, but Joel got the ball extended, the post extended. So it's not like he got in a great position to make a quick move and go up with the basket. So that's number one. So, I mean, I don't know if you can see right there. Yeah, see where he's getting the ball. I mean, Aldridge has him pretty far out. Now, Joel has developed over the course of the years a phenomenal kind of dribble drive game. So that's not too much to ask him to make that move. But to me, the play is kind of stagnant from the start, meaning Joel got that ball extended. Everybody else, as you're showing there, Chris, is ball watching. Everybody else is ball watching. There's no movement. There's nothing that Joel can see, identify. And not only that, nothing that can create more space for Joel. So if you look at exactly when Joel makes that move towards the basket, and I don't know, is that Kevin Durant who makes the move inside? Yeah. So he's not only has to manage Aldridge, but Kevin Durant now is pushing into the rim to make the shot even harder for Embiid. Why? Because the spacing on the court. So this is something that we saw with Ben Simmons on the court. But the question I have is it a function of Ben Simmons being on the court? Because what we're seeing here is apparently not, right? So we're seeing Tyrese Maxey in the same position and your ball handler not handling the ball. So, I mean, it's a common theme with Doc Rivers' led team, and it got the Sixers in a bad position again. I mean, it wasn't the exact reason why they lost, but you have to be able to give alternatives to your best player. And, guys moving, guys cutting. We talk about that all the time. Like, that should be a constant in your offense, and it's not under Doc Rivers. The idea of motion ball movement, it is not in the Sixers culture. It comes and goes, but it's not part of the culture. And we're seeing how it plays out in very bad scenarios.
All right, let's quickly go into Kevin Durant, who was just a beast last night. He was 9 of 20 from the field, 29 points, a plus 11. He had 15 boards, 12 assists, a block, a steal, just 2 turnovers. Let's look at how the Sixers defended Kevin Durant. Here we have what's this one?
That's a big.
This is overall. This is how the Sixers defended Kevin Durant overall. But how do you think the Sixers did trying to contain Kevin Durant last night, man?
So, I mean, you look at the numbers and you're like, holy hell, like Kevin Durant had a monster game. Kevin Durant's Kevin Durant. Like, he's always going to have a monster game, regardless of who he's playing, regardless of who he's facing. I mean, that's who he is. But I thought that the Sixers did a really good job last night of doing something that I think most teams need to do against Kevin Durant, which is turn him into a passer. So, yeah, I mean, you think you read the number, I think he's like 11 or 12 assists or something like that. And obviously a big function of that is them not having Kyrie Irving on the roster. So he's having to be more of a creator. But I thought that where Kevin Durant likes to live is in that mid-range area, right? We all know that. He really loves that, pull-up mid-range. He's a absolute killer in that area. And I thought that the Sixers did a really good job first flowing help towards him to get him to pass the ball. So anytime you made a move towards the mid-range, they would have a defender and somebody else kind of flow towards him and have him immediately pass, which is why you saw guys like Patty Mills and LaMarcus Aldridge have monster games. But if you are playing the Nets, I'm okay with Patty Mills and LaMarcus Aldridge hitting shots than Kevin Durant hitting shots, because if Kevin Durant's on, like, you have no chance, period. So What I saw particularly from the Sixers, and specifically around Matisse Thybulle, again, Thybulle's a guy who does not have the length extension that Kevin Durant does. I think you have it right there, Chris. That's the play. So if you could go back real quickly, I don't know if you can go back or not.
Yeah, it's going to slow down.
Because that would be perfect. So you see first how connected Thybulle is to Durant. Like Durant's trying to shake him off, and Thybulle's like stride by stride. And then what's even more impressive about that play is that once Durant goes up for the shot, I mean, Kevin Durant is like a 10-foot wingspan, and watch how Thybulle is able to contest the shot at the shot point. So I don't know if you're able to stop it. Like he is right there. He's right there. And perfect. He is right there meeting the ball at the release point. And that is something that is extremely impressive because it is extremely difficult to match Kevin Durant at that release point. I mean, I can't imagine how many players are able to do that in the NBA. So, Matisse's ability to stay connected with Durant, not foul him, and then be able to meet him at that release point, I thought it was something that was extremely impressive. Now, granted, Durant got his on tees, but it's about slowing him down, and it's about making him into a passer and making these shots as contested as possible. So if you look at the big picture, I think the Sixers did a very good job on Durant as a whole. And it gives me hope that they have some alternatives to defending him. Again, not saying to stop him, but to try to slow him down. I thought that they did a pretty good job of that for the most part yesterday.
And I liked what they did. Like, they kind of let Durant get his a little bit, especially in the first half. I liked what I saw in the first half because at one point late in the second quarter, Durant was going off. He was getting his. But the rest of the Nets starters were a combined 6 of 22. So they were kind of like removing everyone else but Durant in that first half. It kind of got away from them with James Harden and so forth in the second half. But I'm good with what I saw. Ben Butler says, spot on, Tiago. The D looked okay to me. Sixers lacked creation on offense, way too much ISO, which is exactly what we saw in last year's playoffs. Next up, we've got an interview with my man, Mark Henry Jr. He is a host of the Tough Cover podcast. He does the Everything's Fine podcast. He does Chalk Talk here at TPL. We talked about Furkan Korkmaz, and we talked about Doc Rivers' late game struggles. Let's play the interview here. All right, guys. Now we've got my man, Mark Henry Jr. Follow him on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _. My man does Chalk Talk with my man Shane. He does the Tough Cover podcast if you want to win some money. And he also does an amazing Philly sports podcast with Kyle named Everything is Fine. Guys, follow my man, Mark Henry. What's going on, Mark?
Thank you for having me. Not much except every sport in the world right now. I was happy to kind of sit back, relax, and watch the Sixers. It feels like I host an Eagles podcast. I host a gambling podcast. The Sixers are kind of like the last thing I have left that I don't have to talk about every day. So this is like a fun thing instead of me feeling like obligated to do it, I guess.
Yeah, there is a topic looming going on right now that I'm just sick of talking about. But let's talk about Sixers versus Pelicans. I've got a trio of questions for you. How much should Sixers fans believe in Furkan Korkmaz as the secondary ball handler for the Sixers moving forward, man? What's your take?
I don't think it can be that consistent. I think that they're going to have to find a secondary ball handler, whether that be in a trade, in a Ben Simmons trade, whether that be Shake Milton coming back from an ankle injury, probably not, but it'll probably be someone that's not currently on the roster if I had to guess. But that's not to say that I don't think Sixers fans should be excited about Furkan with that shaggy hair look out there. Brett Brown talked about it 2 years ago. He wanted to grow a bomber. It finally seems to have happened. Furkan, I love what I saw out of him last night and the confidence he had to really take control of the game in the second half there. That's the kind of stuff we've wanted to see from Furkan. And we have seen it in small spurts, but I do think people should be excited about him. He's a legitimate three-point shooter.
I know you're a numbers guy, so just joke around with me just for 1 second, but this is like absolutely hilarious. His assist percentage, 44.1%, up from 7 and 11 the last 2 years. Usage percentage up to 30.9%, and then a laughable 164 offensive rating from last night. Just a ton of fun. The ebb and flows of Sixers season. Things are going to change week to week. But yeah, point Furkan Korkmaz, the chemistry he had with George Niang there. He made a couple skip passes. He found him Niang in the corner a couple times. The chemistry was real. It was just a really fun positive from the season opener. Next question: what was your reaction to Tyrese Maxey's first start, and what are your realistic projections from this guy this season?
I mean, it's hard not to be excited about Tyrese Maxey. I mean, he's the most exciting thing going on in Sixerland right now, I would say, if I had to. The ability he has to get uncontested layups and floaters in congested paints is unbelievable. It's not necessarily him being the fastest player or the quickest player. He's just crafty. He knows where to go. He knows what spots to get to. He knows the spots on the court, and he's always able to find that little bit of space to get a floater off that seems to be like one of the top 5 to 10 floaters in the NBA already. Him and Quickly, the guards from Kentucky, both have just excellent floaters already, bringing the floater back. And I love what he brings. I mean, if he's able to continue hitting threes like he was last night, and as fluid as that jumper looked to me comparatively to early on last year, I mean, the sky's the limit for Tyrese Maxey. And I've always said, De'Aaron Fox is not a perfect one-to-one comparison for Tyrese Maxey, but I do truly believe he can get to that level of player. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be, he's not a Bradley Beal 45% three-point shooter. He's not Steph Curry. He's not Dame Lillard. So he's another level down. His upside, I think, is another level down. I think it's around that De'Aaron Fox, Mike Conley level, and I think we could expect some shades of what those guys did in their younger careers.
Yeah, I really liked what I saw in the second half for Tyrese Maxey against the Pelicans. He was 3 of 3 outside of 15 feet. And like I said during the postgame show, like if that guy develops a reliable pull-up jumper, a reliable three-point shot, the way he's able to turn corners, the way he's able to come off screens and attack, penetrate, get to the rim, it's just really exciting stuff for the Philadelphia 76ers. Last up, and I wanted to ask you this specifically because I know me and you aren't the biggest Doc Rivers guys. For you, what are some ways Doc Rivers can kind of silence some of the doubters, some of the haters, and show improvement in 2021?
So this is a little bit of the problem I have with this. So I remember telling myself after Game 5, after Game 7 against the Hawks last year, just reminding myself, don't forget about this. Don't let this wash over by the time October and November comes around. And I told myself, if the Sixers come out and win 55 to 60 games again, I'm still not going to be like, oh, Doc Rivers is the guy in the playoffs. I have no doubts. We've seen it now. We saw it in Philly. We saw it in LA. And I've always maintained my problem with Doc and the Ben comments. I think a lot of that was kind of trying to shield blame elsewhere away from his 10th consecutive blown series lead in the playoffs. So I have a lot of problems with Doc, and I obviously have a lot of problems with the rotation. One thing that he can do just to kind of not get me to come after him quite as often would be obviously we don't know what's happening with Ben. We don't know if Ben's coming back. We don't know if he's getting traded anytime soon. Obviously, that's the big looming question that I don't even want to really get too far into. But if Ben Simmons does come back, and I think he's actually faking back tightness right now as we speak, if Ben Simmons does come back, I think, the way Doc cannot, make me want to go nuts is don't do the same thing he did with Dwight last year. Don't play Ben with Drummond. Don't play Ben, Matisse, and Drummond. And we saw last night, I think Drummond is a perfect backup center on this team without Ben. And just like I said a million times last year, I think Dwight would have been a perfect backup center on this team without Ben. I do think Drummond is a little better, though, makes a little less dumb mistakes. So that would be one big way, and that's obviously a big if, depending on the Ben Simmons factor. But just to try to always play shooters around Andre Drummond and the backup lineup if possible. And it looks very possible with guys like Niang, guys like Furkan. Hopefully Isaiah Joe didn't have a great first game. Hopefully that can kind of balance out, and we can see some more of that preseason Isaiah Joe that we were all excited about, and put those types of guys with Andre Drummond. Don't make Matisse and Ben Simmons play with someone that doesn't fit with them.
Yeah, you look at the bench, 45 points from the bench last night against the Pelicans. Andre Drummond, Matisse Thybulle, Niang, and Korkmaz together had a true shooting percentage of 76.5 and a net of 55.8. However, that's all good, but I still want to see more cutting to the basket. I want to see Matisse Thybulle unleashed. I want to see Doc Rivers put guys in position to offensively, be a positive, because we really saw that decline, with Doc Rivers. The Sixers were literally the worst team in cutting to the basket last year, and they were even worse, 3.8% last night against the Pelicans. So I want to see that implemented a little more. With no Ben Simmons, it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the offense moving forward, with not a guy that's just going to sit in a corner or sit in the dunker spot or what have you. But thank you for joining, man. Where can we find you, and what do you got going on, man?
Yeah, you can follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _, and I have way too much going on. I have the Tough Cover podcast at Tough Cover Pod for my gambling picks. I think we're up 82.5 units in the month of October. We were up like 150 something in September. Been on the gambling run of a lifetime since the beginning of football season this year. So hopefully that continues. I'm also talking Philly sports at Everything's Fine, so go give that a follow. And I talk Eagles here on the Painted Lines with Shane Haff on the podcast Chalk Talk. I also do some stuff with Fox PHL The Gambler, so go give that a check. Way too much stuff, but if you go and follow at Mark Henry Jr. _, go check it out in the bio.
My man is busy. Go give him a follow. Give him some love. He is at Mark Henry Jr. _. Thanks, Mark. All right, that was Mark Henry Jr. Thanks again, Mark, for joining the show. All right, hey, you talk about like Doc Rivers, man. The offense, the stale offense. I just can't not think about that stale offense where just nobody moves. We showed at the beginning of the program where Joel Embiid is backing down in the post and no one's moving. I mean, that's just to piggyback off of that interview. What's up, Tiago?
Yeah, I mean, that point that Mark brought up about, him using Ben Simmons as a shield for his failures, like that's something that's rarely talked about in this town. Ben Simmons had a horrific playoff series. There's no questions about it. So did the rest of the team, and so did Doc Rivers. And we don't talk much about Doc Rivers as a playoff coach in this town. And his history as a playoff coach, like Mark is talking about, it's riddled with failures. So, he's going to be here for this year, and we have to see when the time comes. But so far, I would say the starts and the arrows are pointing very negatively towards that direction.
That's the biggest takeaway, right? Like of last night, of this Nets game, was it gave you the flashbacks of that Hawks series when the Sixers gave up they had that monumental collapse there in the second half, and there was nothing. Like Doc's answer on offense was feed Joel Embiid and no ball movement, and it's just that ISO offense just continues to give me nightmares. And big picture wise, where are we going? What are we learning from this? And how can we expect a different outcome in the 2022 playoffs? And I don't know, man. It's looming. There's an elephant in the room, and it is definitely giving me a little issues here.
But here's the thing: like, assuming they trade Ben Simmons at some point in the regular season, right? And whatever they get in return, if they're not getting a guy like Damian Lillard in particular, who is an assassin in isolation, right? It's going to be, I have a tough time seeing how it's going to improve him as a late game offense. Because say you get like a mediocre, not a mediocre, but a one step down shot maker. Say for instance, you get like a Zach LaVine. I'm using as a theoretical, right? Zach LaVine, very good player, like tremendous player. But are you going to ask Zach LaVine to isolate your player in the fourth quarter of a playoff game? Because if you are, I'm going to tell you that's probably a recipe for a disaster. Because I don't think Zach LaVine is at that level yet. He may get to that level, but he's not that consistent. He can sometimes give you some buckets that way, but in the playoffs, Zach LaVine 101. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they get for Ben Simmons if they trade Ben Simmons, because if they're not getting that top guy, I don't see how Doc's offense can bring out a more coherent kind of late game approach, which is what we're kind of asking for when you say talking about like movement, cutting, different guys handling the ball late in game. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's going to be very interesting.
Can I give one positive from last night? I mean, we kind of talked about we both kind of agreed we were okay with how the Sixers defended Kevin Durant last night. The other positive is you look at game one, the Sixers with Joel Embiid off the court were a plus 16. Last night they were a -1. When was the last time the Sixers were a plus 15 in a 2-game stretch with no Joel Embiid on the court? So there is that. The bench wasn't as good as they were in game one here last night. But the Sixers are doing a good job, with Joel Embiid off the court. And like you said, if they can add more pieces to that, there is something to be said there. I think that is definitely a major positive, because it used to be like the exact opposite. When Joel Embiid went off the court, it was just floodgates to the rim, and the Sixers could not stop anybody. So there is that about Andre Drummond. Ben Butler says Drummond has different energy to Dwight, but softer hands. Let's wrap up the program here. I'm going to show you my top 5 plays with some honorable mentions. I'm going to get your reaction. Let's do this.
Harden dribbles right into Thibault. Nice outlet pass. Maxey with the finish.
Oh, man. There are plays like this where there were some real highs in this game last night against the Nets, right, Tiago?
There were a lot of them. I thought they played really well. And one of the things I want to see more of is Maxey in the open court, because this guy is your fastest player. The Sixers need to play with more pace when Maxey's on the court. I'm going to continue to say that. If you look at their pace, it's down. It should be up. A team like the Nets, you can really catch their older team. You should have been running the ball a lot more than what you did.
We've got a guy from Germany joining. Says new sub and greetings from Germany. What is going on? Thank you for joining. Let's continue the highlight reel. I love this. Defense to offense. Nothing better, man.
Nice outlet pass. Maxey with the finish. What a beautiful pass from Thibault. Carter to Claxton. Claxton tries to spin.
Joel Embiid block leads to Tobias Harris transition bucket. That was a very common trend that we saw, whether it was Seth Curry or Tobias Harris answering the Nets run. They continued to do that through especially the third quarter. Didn't really necessarily happen in the fourth quarter, but you gotta love that. Yeah. Here we go, to number 5.
Durant fires away. His three-pointer is short. Ball tipped. Taken by Danny Green.
This is the start of the game. The back-to-back threes by Danny Green. After putting up a goose egg in game one, I thought the back-to-back threes by Danny Green were pretty freaking hilarious. Now, none of those shots hit the rim in the fourth quarter.
I was going to say, do you have a clue it was 3 air balls in the fourth quarter?
No, it's too early. It's too early for that. But that was a funny. Oh man. Let's go to number 4.
Shot and also give them a big guy.
This. We talk about Andre Drummond.
I mean, I took a video of that shot. So the ESPN showed a replay from Andrew Drummond's vision, meaning from behind the basket, the other side of the court. And in that look, like if you freeze it, like when he makes the pass, Tobias Harris is not even close to being over.
Look at that.
Yeah, like Tobias Harris is like 2 steps behind him, and he threads it to where Tobias can just step right in and go up with it. I mean, he's a really fun passer, a really good passer, phenomenal vision. However, he can get a little like Magic Johnson-ish approach. And dude, you're not Magic Johnson, so like tone it down a couple notches. But he's fun to watch, man. He's been really good. I got to give him a lot of credit.
Look at Tobias. Like, he's nowhere near the ball on this with the ball out of Drummond's hands. That is impressive. And right around this play, I don't know if it was like the next offensive possession or later, but Andre Drummond had a behind-the-back pass to, I think, Georges Niang in the corner that would have brought the house down. Like, I was watching the game with my wife, and I remember just like literally jumping off the couch, hoping that Niang would hit that, and he missed it. But that would have been arguably probably top play of October, November, whatever month you want to call it. It was a really interesting development. Like, I didn't expect Andre Drummond to be this good at passing, but there it is. It's pretty great. And Tobias Harris finishes the amazing pass. Number 3.
That's a huge stat. They're up +8 against Philadelphia because that's an area that.
This is another answer from Seth Curry. I thought was huge.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. I don't think he's missed at all this year. And one thing I want to point out on that clip is you see Korkmaz like handle ball pressure, right? So if in the beginning of the clip, like there's a dude right on him, and does a phenomenal job of just dribble away from that, and that's something that Shake Milton struggles with. So Shake Milton, who's probably going to be the Sixers point guard when he comes back healthy, can't do some of the stuff that Korkmaz is doing on the ball. So just something to keep an eye on, because I've been very impressed by Korkmaz as a ball handler. Like Mark said, like it's not sustainable, but it gives you an alternative from the bench.
2 games. Korkmaz has 2 turnovers. With his usage rate going freaking that high, I'm impressed. He only had 10 points last night. But again, 2 turnovers with being asked to be the secondary ball handler. That is pretty impressive. So Seth Curry stopping another Brooklyn Nets run here was my number 3. Seth Curry had an unbelievable game last night. Not unlike the collapse of the Atlanta Hawks series, where Seth Curry can't miss. No one else does anything. There's no ball movement. Pretty similar scenarios here.
Right.
Number 2. That back 3 by Tyrese Maxey was pretty sweet.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that if he is ever able to master in his game, it puts him in an entirely different conversation as an NBA prospect, and his ceiling goes from perhaps like a low end starter to potentially even like an all-star if he's able to master that shot. I mean, that is really something that we want to keep an eye on with Tyrese Maxey, because he hits that shot consistently, it's over. And I just want to point out that the time and the clock and the score. So he's doing this in the 4th quarter in a tie game against the Brooklyn Nets. No hesitation, goes up with it. I know he missed a couple late in the game, but I thought that last night he had a very strong showing defensively against James Harden. And it's what you want, man. You want minutes from Tyrese Maxey early, have him make some mistakes, learn, and go from there.
There you go. Beautiful. Tyrese Maxey is 3 of 8 from 3 through 2 games. Gotta love 4 3-point attempts per game. I like to see that keep going up. Keep shooting, kid. Keep shooting. Let's go to my number 1. Man, we talked about this on the post-game show.
When you thought the game was over, Chris.
We talked about this.
Yeah, we talked about this. I thought the game was over then. It's 5:40 left in the game. Andre Drummond's still out there. And I'm thinking, listen, the Nets called a timeout. The Sixers come back out with Joel Embiid and close the game out. And the Sixers did not come out with Joel Embiid. They came back out with Andre Drummond. And the Nets went back to immediately, I think it was a 6-0 run before Embiid checked back in. So, man, I know we talked about Drummond having a good start of the year. 8 fourth quarter minutes from Andre Drummond, or 7, whatever the number is. That's way too much. I'm sorry. That's way too much. So
the Sixers scored 3 points after this.
Yeah.
Or no, it was 108. They scored 1 point
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it was a free throw by Curry. Just unbelievable. Just like I remember talking about this on the post game last night, where you saw this. This game had some highs. This game had some real highs, and I was really proud of our guys here. But you look at this play; it was terrific. Andre Drummond's steal leads to the alley-oop to Matisse Thybulle.
And that's what Thybulle does. I mean, we talk about him, in the open floor, right, running. You see how fast he is, how he's able to get up. Tobias actually made a good pass for a change, which is also nice. So.
Yep. All right, let's wrap it up. We are 35 minutes in. Tiago, where can we find you? What do you got going on?
You can find me here at the Painted Lines at Tiscabi, also on Twitter. And we'll continue to do these post-game shows and morning Cup with Joe shows in the morning. Try to identify things that we're seeing in more detail throughout the game. We know it's tough sometimes to see stuff as the game is going on. So we just try to call out some stuff that, can help in the long run and also impacts the score of the game. So look out for these types of shows.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. RJ Lucas says we still look great though, guys.
Yeah.
We can beat any other team, just got a little stagnant. I mean, I don't know how much Doc Rivers is going to start learning new tricks here. So that's my only major concern here. And there were concerns before last season. There were concerns before the playoff series. There were concerns after the playoff series versus the Hawks. And now there are concerns only 2 games in to the regular season. So follow my man Tiago on Twitter at Tscabia. Thank you, Mark Henry, for joining our show. You can follow him on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ does amazing work. If you love sports betting, the dude is on fire right now. So check him out, win some money. Let's all be happy. Guys, if you're watching us live, thank you for waking up with us this morning and reacting with us. Thank you to all of our commenters during the show. And please give this video a like so you can help us grow our brand. I am Dobbs, Mr. Crockpot on Twitter. For Tiago, for myself, thanks for watching, guys.